Welcome back to the Friday Five for October 4th, 2024. My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm a business law and estate planning attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. Today I'm coming to you from the desert out in Arizona for a conference. So we've gotten on the road Friday Five. So what we like to do on Fridays is look at 5 questions from the week and try to get them answered in about 5 minutes. So let's get started. Question number 1 this week. Do I have to tell a renter that I put a property into an LLC? So in this case, I spoke to a caller who's setting up a variety of LLCs with some rental properties. But for whatever reason, on one of the properties, they wanted to make sure that the renter did not know that the property was moved into the LLC. I'm not exactly sure why, other than they thought that the renter would have a different relationship with the owner of the property, thinking they were trying to do some tricks or trying to do something underhanded by moving the property into an LLC. But regardless, the big question was whether or not we have to tell the renter that the property was moved into the LLC. So first of all, if the renter really wants to find out, they'd be able to go to the local property register and be able to look at who owns the property. So you can't really totally hide the fact that a property is moved into an LLC. It will be in the property records. However, more commonly, the question is on a day-to-day basis, how would they know? And that would really be when we update our lease agreement. So if we move a property into an LLC and your lease payments have been coming to your name personally and you now want them to go to the LLC's bank account, we usually have to do what's called an assignment of lease, meaning we send a 1-page document to the tenant saying that your lease payments used to go to John Smith. Now they go to 123 Main Street LLC. So in that case, yes, the renter would find out that the property had been moved into the LLC. One of the workarounds that this client was thinking of doing was just not telling the renter for now and having the payments come to them personally, and then they could deal with what bank account to deposit the rent into when they receive the monthly rent. Question 2 this week, can I put multiple properties into one LLC? And this is a very common question I get. When you look at the cost associated with setting up an LLC, it's going to depend upon what state you're in and how much the filing fees are, if there's annual registrations, what kind of filings we have to do. And in that case, people will come to me and say, I don't want to spend money on 4 or 5 or 6 LLCs. I have a bunch of properties. Why don't I just put them into one LLC? And the concern we have here is if you put multiple properties into an LLC, that then means that if there's a lawsuit on one of the properties, the value of the other properties, which are property of the LLC, would then be available if there's a judgment issued against you. So the main purpose for these LLCs is usually for liability protection. And if that's what we're worried about, then we don't want to put multiple properties into an LLC. We want each property to have its own LLC so we can contain that liability. Question 3 this week, what happens if the other party just never shows up for court dates? And you'd be surprised how often this happens. I've been in litigations over the years where we've even talked to the other party in advance of a court date. We've had discussions. Maybe we've even had settlement negotiations. But when it comes time to go to court, they just don't show up. And the question is, what do we do? Obviously, from a client standpoint, you get very frustrated because you're there, you're with your attorney, you're ready to proceed, and the other party isn't there. The judge also usually will share that frustration. Unless there's a really good reason why the other party is not present in court, the judge will usually be pretty annoyed that one party is there and the other party is not there. And it depends upon the role of the other party in the case. If the other party is the plaintiff, if they're the one who brought the lawsuit and they refuse to show up in court, the judge can dismiss the case. If they're the defendant, the judge will often want to find out whether or not they were properly served, and if they were, the judge can then issue a default judgment against them, meaning you win the case without them participating, without having to go through a full trial. You may have to do what we call an inquest, where you do testify to what your damages are, but that default will always be available. So if you've been served with papers, I never recommend that you do not show up in court unless there's a really good reason. For example, you find the papers in the sewer under your house for some reason, cleaning out the gutters at the end of the season. So that really probably wasn't good service. But generally, if you've been served with papers, you want to make sure you understand what you need to do next and if there are court appearances. Question 4 this week. Can a trustee hire an attorney to help them administer the trust? So in this case, somebody had been appointed actually by a court to be the trustee for a trust for somebody else, and they needed to manage the money because the child was under the age of 18, and they're a trusted resource for the family. They're a CPA. They understand the accounting, and I think that's the real reason why the court appointed them. And the caller's question was, can I actually hire an attorney to help me be the trustee? Now, the attorney is not going to be brought in to be an actual trustee. They're not going to manage the money. They're really there for legal advice. And what you want to do is look at the terms of the trust, whether or not it's created by a court or whether it's created privately by somebody. The trust will usually say whether or not your trustee has the power to retain and bring on professionals to help them be the trustee of the property or of the trust, or manage money or whatever else the trust needs you to do. So generally, a trustee can hire an attorney, but we want to make sure we check the trust document first to make sure that power is in there. And question 5, it's a pretty important one. What happens if we find extra pages of paper that are left with the will? So in this case, the caller's mother had passed away. The mother had a will, but they also found a few random pages with the will that seemed to indicate some changes that the mother wanted to have made to the will. Really what it was is that since the time the will was made, some grandchildren had been born, and the mother was wanting to make sure that she left some money for her grandchildren as well as her actual children. And the question is really going to come down to whether or not these pages we found are going to be enforceable or not. We usually want to look at whether or not they've been signed, whether they've been witnessed, whether there's a notary for the witnesses' signatures. We want to look at the formalities that we look for in a regular will to see whether or not these additional pieces of paper meet those formalities. And if they don't, but you still want that to be part of the probate, then you've got more of an uphill battle because you've got to work with the judge, and you probably have to show the judge evidence that this writing was the true intention of your mother. Maybe it was signed by and only witnessed by one witness instead of two. It's a really factual situation. But if you find these extra papers with your will, and in this case it was in New York, so New York does not allow for a separate personal property memorandum. So states like Minnesota do. So you can often find extra papers with will in Minnesota with things like my artwork goes to my cousin Jane, China goes to my cousin Jimmy, whatever that is. So we need to make sure we know what state you're in and how they treat these kind of documents as far as enforceability. So that's our 5 questions on the road here in Arizona. If you like this video, you can hit the like or thumbs up button below. You can head on over to YouTube to subscribe for future episodes. You can submit a question at the link below, and you can always go to my website, 𝙁𝙊𝙇𝙊𝙒.com, for a legal strategy session, or we can get you some more information. Wherever you are, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and if you're out here in Arizona with me, I hope you stay cool because it's really hot.